Alright, I've got all the components back in my parents' garage now. We've got the front shocks, the two knuckles, driver's and passenger side, as long as the front sway bar, and of course the lower control arms that we are going to be pressing the bushings out of today. We're going to also be removing the upper control arms from the knuckle. There's a ball joint on top that presses in. We're going to also try to be removing the bushings from the upper control arms as well. The goal behind all this is to get these components ready for powder coating this week, and then to install all new hard race hardened rubber bushings. So for the compliance bushing, we're using a 1 3/4 inch socket, which fits pretty close to the outer diameter of the bushing. It's a little bit less is what you want. The sleeve on the bottom here is a hollow cylinder, and the inside diameter is larger than the outside diameter of the bushing, so that's allowing it to drop straight through. Cranking down. This one's going a little easier than the driver's side. There it is. The compliance bushing pressed out of the control arm, and here's the old compliance bushing I cut out of the car. Alright, so now we're doing the shock bushings. On the top we have a socket that's a 1 inch socket, 12 point, and on the bottom is a 1 7/16 inch. That seems to fit the outer diameter of the control arm pretty well, and this 1 inch socket seems to just be smaller than the outer diameter of the shock bushing sleeve, so hopefully this works. So here's the shock bushing we just pressed out. So for both lower control arms now, we have both shock bushings pressed out. They go right there, and then on this one right there. Both of the caster compliance bushings are out as well. All we have to do left for the lower control arms is the tricky camber bushings, which we're not sure how to do yet, but we're going to figure it out. So for the camber bushing, a lot of people online said to burn it out, but we've managed to rig up a setup here to slowly push out on it. The problem is this outer diameter is roughly the same outer diameter as the control arm, so you can't put a socket around the back side and push from the front. So what we did was we cut a flat off the side with a hacksaw and broke the tab off, so we had just enough room to slide material to grip the control arm on the press, and we're holding it over here with our carefully selected socket to kind of keep the arm as even as possible. And at first, to break it loose, we just used the bottom spacer, and now that we've gotten a little further, we've added a couple more, and the bushing seems to be pressing out. Alright, so we got the bushing for the camber about halfway out, and to space it up to gain some more room on the bottom, we used a inch straight socket to get on the edge there, and then we spaced up this as well to keep the arm level. And we're going to continue to try to pop this out. It's almost out now, so it's going to go a lot easier. And there it is. We've managed to get it out without burning anything. The only thing we did was cut a slot in the corner there. So you can see we cut a slot off the edge of that and broke it off, and managed to get just enough surface on the inside of the outer diameter to pop this out. So the only mod we did to the camber bushing here to avoid burning it out is we cut a slot off the end in the same orientation there. So we're going to do the same to this arm right here and cut a slot off, and that allows you to put a socket or whatever you use as a spacer up against this surface that you expose. So this is just like halfway through the cut. There's a metal outer sleeve up here you got to cut through first, but you want to stay tangent with this ring here, and I'm almost through the bottom ring here, and then we take a chisel and get underneath it and break it back and forth to break that piece off without damaging the surface underneath. Alright, so once you make your cut almost down to the end of the material, almost hitting the control arm, you just got a tiny bit of material left there. You want to get a little chisel underneath there, and you're going to tap. You're going to fold that edge up and then tap it backward. fold it down, and then go back and forth a bunch of times till you break it off. Once you break this piece back and forth a bunch of times, it'll break off, and that's the surface of the control arm you're going to want to use to press your socket or whatever you're using as a spacer up against that. This here is the initial setup before you even break the bushing loose. This is the second control arm. It's the driver's side control arm. And it's a little sketchy, but we have a washer there spacing it up to get the arm perfectly level, and as well as a steel spacer there just to get on that surface we exposed, spacing it level with a socket on the shock bushing on the other side. So for the upper control arm, what we're doing now is to press the ball joint out. We found a 1 3/4 inch wrench from Harbor Freight. We're going to use the end of it just to span the edge of the diameters, and all we had to do was cut a little slot on this. The outer diameter of this is 1.77 inches just about, so we had to grind a little bit off each side to make it just under 1.75 inches so the wrench will fit and lay on this surface so we can push the ball joint out from the opposite side. So we were able to pop the first ball joint out of the upper control arm, and I'll show you. We're about to do the second one. This is the setup we're going to use. We used the castle nut that we took off the ball joint earlier. We're just going to use the 17mm socket. Make sure the castle nut's threaded down as far as you can get it to level with the end of the ball joint thread, and then put your 17mm socket over there. You're going to push down with the press on this side, and with the slots we cut earlier, we're going to be able to use the 1 3/4 wrench to fit in those slots underneath. Alright, so this is your setup. There's the socket I just pointed out earlier. There's the press, and then you have the wrench underneath spanning over, putting all the pressure on the control arm. And we're going to crank down on it here. And there it goes. Alright, so we got both slots cut in the upper control arm. We're going to use each of those flats, and those surfaces exposed are the surface of the control arm, not the bushing anymore. So we're going to use an 1 3/8 Pittsburgh Harbor Freight Special open-end wrench to slide over that. So this will be the top setup for the press, and we're going to use a large socket over this to clear that and push down on it. And underneath, the diameter of that, the outer diameter of the bushing, is 1.35 inches. So we have a socket that's about 1.33 inches to go underneath the A-arm and push up on that. Alright, so here's the setup for the upper control arm. On the bottom, pushing upward on the bushing, is going to be a 15/16 Pittsburgh Harbor Freight socket that's got a 1.33 OD on it. The outer diameter on the bushing is 1.35, so it gives you about 20 thousandths of clearance to push that through the arm. Up here is our 1 3/8 wrench spanning the two slots we cut earlier, and then we're using a 1 5/8 inch 3/4 inch drive socket on top. So the inner diameter of this is larger than the flange of the bushing, so when we pop it loose it should slide into the socket, and on top of the socket is the press itself. Looks like it's going right away. Yep. It's going with ease.
We're hitting over there.
Well, we're going to hit the control arm on the brace there, so we got to figure something else out. Alright, so we made sure now that we put the upper control arm through this radius cutout here, so it doesn't, before we were hitting on the edge of the block there, and we didn't bend the control arm, but if we kept going we probably would have. And we got our socket halfway through on the inside of the bushing now, the wrench, and then the socket that's going over the top. and now it's sliding right through. So we're hitting here again, but we're almost all the way out now. So we ended up going all the way through, but we think we went too far and drove the bushing into the socket a little bit. Didn't hurt no one though. And there's one of the upper control arms out. No burning or torching anything required. Alright, so this is the second one we're doing, and we just made sure we got to make sure we have enough clearance here so when the arm comes down that it doesn't hit on the base right there. And that is clear there. And let's send it. There it is. That's how you do it. Alright, so it's almost 6 o'clock here and we finished pressing out all the bushings in the lower control arms as well as the upper control arms. They're all out. We didn't use a torch for anything. The majority of the time probably was spent on trying to figure out what size sockets to use and figuring out a setup to use on the press itself. So I hope this video saves you guys a bunch of time when selecting the proper sockets and what you guys need to know to buy and go out and get to be prepared to do this job. Just another quick look at the components. There's all the old bushings, OEM shocks, and then there's the bushings pressed out of the lower control arms, including the shock bushings as well. So the next step is I'm going to be sandblasting the arms and then getting them sent out for powder coat. So thanks again guys for watching. I hope this helps you guys out if you're going to tackle this job. The point of this video is to save you guys a bunch of time and to make you feel like you can do this job yourself. Just be prepared to have a bunch of time and patience with this job. And setup is everything. Whenever you're pushing the bushings out, make sure your sockets are perfectly concentric on the press and everything should run smoothly. Definitely give this video a thumbs up if you found this helpful. I haven't found another video on YouTube like this. The only knowledge I had of this job before was reading on the forums and whatnot, so hopefully this video is much easier to follow and saves you guys a bunch of headache.